is certainly worth the trip. And I'm noticing that these toys are made in China. And we have nothing against China. I mean, it's not. I hope Chinese workers are well compensated, but I do want you to understand. It's okay, brother. It looks good. I want you to understand that toys like this used to be made in America. They used to be made in Massachusetts at a lot of little factories, mostly by wonderful Italian Americans, immigrant workers. Not all Italians, Portuguese, and others. And I used to work for their union. They had the coolest union, Local 21, coolest union today, without a doubt, no doubt. But in their day, they had the coolest union name ever. It was Playthings, Jewelry, and Novelty Workers. And their conventions were, it's entirely whoopee cushions and like glasses that hung down, and it was fabulous. Like you would shake hands with these guys and they'd have a buzzer. And they were wonderful blue-collar American workers who proudly made little toys that made kids happy. And you know what happened to them? Bain Capital bought their factories. Why was Mitt Romney up in Massachusetts? He went up there. They started buying up little manufacturing plants around New England. They bought up all these little toy plants and all these little jewelry plants that they used to make Foster Grant sunglasses. Bain didn't buy all of them. There were other venture capitalists that came in. But they bought up plant after plant after plant. And this is the thing nobody tells you about Bain Capital. Do you know who Bain Capital's got a contract with? Bain Capital doesn't have a contract with California. Bain Capital doesn't have a contract with Wisconsin, doesn't have a contract with any American workers. Bain Capital has a contract with a Chinese province to industrialize that province. And so when they buy an American company up, they're not buying that company up to save it. They're buying it up to gut it and to ship those jobs overseas. These toys would be made in America if you didn't have companies like Bain Capital and politicians like Mitt Romney. That's what we're fighting about, brothers and sisters. This is a real thing. Because there's nothing that matters to me than a couple little shoes that walk across. And so I come to you today. I want to tell you, if you remember nothing of what I say, you'll be exactly like my wife. But if you remember nothing of what I say whatsoever, remember this. San Francisco is not broke. Oakland is not broke. San Jose is not broke. Richmond is not broke. Alameda County is not broke. Contra Costa County is not broke. California is not broke. America is not broke. This is the richest country in the world. We have massive resources. We are not broke. What we've got is a broken politics that redistributes the wealth upwards rather than putting the wealth where it belongs with working people in this country. And let me tell you just how not broke we are. Because I don't think you hear this enough. Even in the labor movement, we are not told as often as we should be how rich we are. There's a group called the Tax Justice Foundation, Tax Justice Network. It's an international group, and what they do is they look at where the money is. They recently hired one of the top corporate economists in the world, and they gave this guy a whole bunch of money, and they said, figure out how much money is in Mitt Romney's tax shelter. Figure out how much money there is in the Cayman Islands and in Switzerland, and not just for Mitt, but for all these folks. How much money have they sheltered? Because you understand what a tax shelter is. Do you know what a rain shelter is? Right? You're waiting for the bus, you step into that shelter, you don't get rained on. When you step into the tax shelter, you don't get taxed. And so when somebody takes their money and puts it in the tax shelter, they don't pay taxes. What that means is that every penny that goes into a Cayman Islands tax shelter, a Swiss tax shelter, a tax shelter anywhere in the world, every penny that goes in there, those are resources that ought to be legally, morally, structurally in San Francisco and San Jose and Oakland and Contra Costa County. Ought to be in those places, but no, it gets taken out and put away. How much money? This guy studied the whole world. They looked at, this is a very serious economist. The guy's a conservative. No, it's not some radical. 21 trillion with a T, $21 trillion is sheltered from taxation right now. $21 trillion. So the next time somebody comes to you and says, we really don't have, we're just broke. We don't have money. It's, with all due respect, nobody's broke. We got money. We have money like we don't know what to do with. The problem is we don't know how to get at it. And you know what? When that study came down, you know what they did in Germany? Angela Merkel, the chancellor of Germany, is a conservative, by the way. She's not a lefty, right? She's not a socialist. Although, in truth, a German conservative is probably the equivalent of an American socialist. But with all due respect to my socialist friends, certainly a German right-winger is the equivalent of an American Democrat. And so you know what Angela Merkel did? You know what they did in Germany? They put out an open offer. They said, if you work for a Swiss bank or for a Cayman Islands bank, you work for any of these, and you've got a list of who's got money hidden there, if you steal that list and give it to us, the government of Germany, we will give you a reward. We will pay you to tell us who's hiding money there. We want the leaks because if we've got the information, we can go after the people, the Germans, who stole the money from working Germans and put it in hidden accounts. Why don't we have a president in the United States and a Congress in the United States that said, we're willing to pay to find out just how much Mitt Romney's hidden in the Cayman Islands and in Switzerland and in other places around the world. Let's start clawing our money back. Let's start saying, I want my money back. And you know what else? You know what else? This is the other interesting thing. When we did the bank bailout, so I know we have engineers here. And we have people, is there people here who work on the Golden Gate Bridge? Or do stuff with the Golden Gate Bridge? So if you screw up the Golden Gate Bridge, if you really screw it up and it collapses into the bay, you would be in trouble. Got a good union, you might be able to, it might just be like a suspension, but you would probably you'd be in trouble. You'd have things to explain, right? Do you realize that in the banking equivalent, if you cause the Golden Gate Bridge to collapse into the bay, we give you another bridge, and we raise your salary, and we give you more money than you had before? Because that's what the bank bailout of 2008 was. That's what the bank bailout of 2008 was. There is no moral argument for that bailout. They're like, oh, we had to do it to make things work. No, they didn't. Don't let anybody tell you that. And you find those political people like Bernie Sanders and Russ Feingold who voted against the bailout, and you shake their hand and you say, thank you, sir, for seeing through the lies of that bailout. Because you know what they did? They said up front, oh, we're going to take $800 million and we're going to use it to stabilize the banks. Well, $800 million, that's nothing. That's cool. That bank bailout released $11 trillion in commitments to back up banks when they got into future trouble. Do you know that Bernie Sanders put a thing into the bank reform bill that said, we want to find out just exactly where all that bank money went? Do you know what they were doing? They were giving every corporation that lost resources when the downturn of 2008 came. They were loaning them money at essentially zero interest so that they could then build themselves back up. Now, how great would that be? How great would that be? You screw up, Mr. Oakland guy, right? You screw it all up. You're at the horse track, and you gamble every cent you've got away. And I say, wow, you are really in trouble. Your wife is going to leave you. You're going to lose your house. You know, it's going to be a bummer. This Christmas is just going to be no good. So why don't I give you all the money that you lost for as long as you need it? You can loan it out. You can do stuff with until you built yourself back up, and then you can pay me back. That would be cool, right? That would be great. Well, that's what they did. And even companies that didn't lose anything. Do you understand this? This is what Bernie Sanders showed. And I wish if we had a media in this country that actually covered economics, you would know this. We were giving loans to the Bank of Libya when our pilots were bombing Libya. We had loan money going to the Bank of Libya when we were bombing Libya. Where did Gaddafi get the money, right? We were backing him up. This is how insane the thing is. Trillions and trillions of dollars put out there that if we just used it for rational, necessary purposes, we would pay our workers, every worker. Nobody would ever get a minimum wage in this country because there's nothing more immoral than the concept of a minimum wage, right? Minimum wage in this country is poverty. No, we would have a living wage in America. Everyone would be guaranteed a living wage because that's what a moral country does. You don't have a minimum wage, you have a living wage. There would be so many other things that we could do without a challenge. Let me give you a couple examples because when people tell you that we're broke, you should understand this. You understand, well, we're so broke we're going to have to take away Social Security. Right? Paul Ryan. Although I will suggest to you that with all due respect, Paul Ryan is probably as good a bogeyman as we've ever had. It's worked out well to illustrate the crisis. But if you happen to be in the 47% that actually needs money, so they want to take away They want to take away Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Do you understand? How do we fix Social Security? How would we possibly? Geez, I don't know. What would we do to fix Social Security? I've got an idea. Why don't we make everybody pay the same percentage into Social Security that a working person has to pay? Why don't we say, you go across the bay right now, Oracle's got all of its rich people over there, right? Fabulous, love them. Great, I'm glad they're in town. Why don't the executives of Oracle have to pay the same percentage of their income into Social Security as you do? If they did, Social Security would be fully funded throughout the future of the republic. There would never be a Social Security problem in this country. So we have a simple fix there. Just have everybody pay the same rate in. Easy. Want to do Medicare, Medicaid? That's easy as well. Do you want to know how you make Medicare and Medicaid work now? You take those programs, you take the Veterans Administration, you take all the other health care programs that we've got, you combine them into a Medicare for all single-payer system, and we cut our medical costs in half and ensure that everybody has access to care. You say, well, Mr. Nichols, those are unrealistic thoughts, right? How could you possibly do that? Well, you know that virtually every other functional country in the world does. We're the outlier on this thing. And you say, well, yeah, but still, I'm a little worried about the money thing. Where are we going to find our resources? It's a little thought. You say, this woman sitting over here, I love her, by the way. She's sitting over, she's typing and going, tax the rich. Make them pay their taxes. I love that. But you know what? We don't even have to tax the rich as much as I would like to tax them. All we have to do is put a financial transactions tax on every transaction that is done. Now, I'm not talking about your grandma selling her AT&T stock. I'm talking about when big traders move money back and forth, because that's where our economy is today. Our economy used to be building things. We used to have factories. Do you know what happens if the longshoremen in San Francisco go on strike? 30 years ago, when they went on strike, you know what the news reports would say? Goods were piling up in the docks. All this American goods that were leaving the country. You know what they say now? Ships we're stuck out in the ocean with all the goods coming in. That's the reality. That's what's happened in 30 years. We've reversed from the docks to the ships. And so we don't manufacture as much as we used to. I wish we did a lot more. We need to reindustrialize, but let us understand that what we do in this country is move paper. We move commodities, stocks, bonds. We don't tax it the way that we do production in this country. If we simply taxed those transfers of paper back and forth with a micro tax, Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota last week introduced a financial transactions tax proposal. Micro tax so small it wouldn't even be noted. It's just in the computer programs as they move it, raises $500 billion a year. $500 million a year, and they wouldn't even notice it. That's what you need to understand. We're not broke. We're not broke, but we have broken politics. And why do we have broken politics? It's pretty simple to answer. When the trade union movement in this country was at its strongest point in the 1950s, we taxed wealthy people at 90% of their income. And you know what happened? We still had rich people who lived in houses up on the hill, and you know what they did? They invested because they didn't want to be taxed. And so they actually built things and made things. And then we had, and I blame Californians for this, this crazy Reagan idea of trickle-down economics. If we stop taxing them, then they'll put it in. No, we already proved if you do tax them, they invest. If you don't tax them, they move the money overseas. And so we know how to fix these things. What we don't know is how to have a politics that makes it work. And that's the main thing I want to talk to you about today. I'm not going to take too much time, because I do want to take some questions from folks. But I want to emphasize that the history of the last 20 years, 30 years in this country has been diminishing and downsizing the power of labor to put logical solutions into the mix. So labor, I don't want to defend organized labor. I don't want to protect organized labor. I don't want to make sure that organized labor can maintain its position, because that doesn't work for America. Organized labor has to be on the march politically, advancing new ideas and fighting to make things happen, not just trying to keep what it's got. But when you beat the hell out of labor for 30 years, it's got to go to a defensive position. And that's the history of what's going on right now. We have great ideas that would solve our problems, but they're not on the table because unions are forced to defend their pay, their wages, their benefits, fighting in San Jose for your pensions. I mean, you can't go out and solve all the problems of the world because you got to solve your own problems. I understand that. But you have to also understand what the fights are about. Right now, in this country, we have restructured our campaign finance system so that billionaires can spend whatever they want. Right? They can just free reign. Millionaires can spend whatever they want, not as much as a billionaire, but they can aspire. And corporations can spend whatever they want. They can just open up the corporate treasury and put it into our politics. And so we've restructured it. And do you understand how bad that system is? Forget about the corruption and the immorality and the unfairness, the inequality. Do you understand how bad it is? They took a functional incompetent named Mitt Romney and they bought him the nominee of a major political party in this country. That's insane. Republicans desperately did not want Mitt Romney to be their nominee. They seriously considered Herman Cain and Michelle Bachmann and Newt Gingrich. They thought, okay, we know that Newt Gingrich is like the most hypocritical, awful person in the history of the planet. We know that when he was divorcing his wife, she had cancer. He went to the room and said, look, I know you're dying, but I got to leave you. We know these are awful, awful people, right? But it's better than Mitt Romney. And yet, Mitt Romney spent tens of millions of dollars and became the nominee of his party for president. He's going to lose in November. Yeah. But I say to my Republican friends, if you didn't have this horrible campaign finance system, you might have a chance. You might have nominated a competent candidate, but you don't, because the corruption, the evil of campaign finance is it pushes down sub-choices upon us. The worst of the worst. The only qualification you have to run for president of the United States is if you can raise money or if you can move money around. That is not a qualification to rule the most powerful country in the world. And so the system is very screwed up. And yet, as screwed up as it is, that's not enough. They can't even win when they have more money. In fact, they can't even win when they have more money than the good Lord. Look at what happened to Ms. Whitman in California. Here you got a woman who's outspending you 19-1, and she still can't win. And so what do you do in a situation like that? If you're outspending 19-1, go after the one. Go after the $1 that can beat your $19. Go, if you're outspending them 10-1, go after the one that can beat your 10. And that's what's going on across America right now. We have the most militant effort in the history of the Republic to shut down the ability of the trade union movement to get its $1 together and beat their $19. That is the history of the last several years in this country. And if we're going to fight a fight, let us fight the fight to keep our voice in the politics of this country so that we can push them back and beat them in election after election. That's got to be what we're fighting for. In my home state of Wisconsin, they came for us. They came for the trade union movement, and the governor got rid of collective bargaining. Why did he get rid of collective bargaining? Well, we have one of the smallest numbers of public sector workers of any state in the North. We are not a heavily employed state. We don't have overly highly paid public employees. They get a decent compensation, but we're not that expensive a place to live. It's not San Francisco. And so why were they going after the unions? Why were they taking away collective bargaining rights? Very simple answer. In the northern tier states of the United States, coming out of the Great Lakes and into Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, places like that, the only entity with enough resources to challenge corporate power, the only entity with enough resources to come into the public sphere and push back, public sector unions. And public sector unions, you say, oh, well, they're just taking care of themselves. Well, I hope so. I hope my kid's teacher is taking care of herself so that she's got enough pay and enough benefits so she can come in well-rested and ready to teach my kid every day. I hope public sector workers take care of themselves. I hope the snowplow drivers take care of themselves so that they can come and plow the road so I can go to work in the morning. I like it when public sector workers take care of themselves. But that's not what Scott Walker was worried about. What he was worried about was that public sector workers were bringing their resources together, going into the politics of Wisconsin and other states. And when they did so, they pushed back and they defended public services. They defended the commons. They defended those things we do together. Because if you shut down the public sector unions, do you know what you get to do? Why do you think the Koch brothers, everybody knows who the Koch brothers are, right? Really rich guys. I have enjoyed the hissing, by the way. Thank you. I noticed at the mention of Scott Walker's name, a little hiss went through the room. It's sort of like, Quakers do the little hand thing like that. Local 21 does the hiss. But the Koch brothers, why would they be giving unbelievable amounts of money, tens of millions of dollars? Well, we know the answer. Because it's worth it. It's worth it. If you shut down public sector unions and you shut down the ability of public sector workers to pool their resources and to fight back against efforts to cut government down, so as Grover Norquist says, we can drown the baby in the bathwater. If you fight against that, if you make it not happen, you make it not able for unions to function, do you know what happens? Government itself becomes dysfunctional. There's no defender of government left. Do you think politicians are going to get up there and say, oh yeah, we're for taxes, we're for resources, we're for infrastructure? They won't do it. The only reason they'll do it is if there's public sector unions that go into the fight and make the case on television, on radio, using the resources of their members to talk about why we need a commons in this country, why we need public services in this country. So if they shut it down, government becomes dysfunctional, and you know what happens then? Privatization, right? You can buy the Golden Gate Bridge. You can buy a waterworks. Do you know the Koch brothers actually run waterworks? They run power plants. They would love to buy power plants for inexpensive amounts. So this is what happens. This is what the fight is about in this country. It is very, very rich people seeking to create a political system where they've got nobody to push back against them. What happened in Wisconsin is that when they came for us, we decided not to do the Reinhold Niemöller situation. We didn't say, oh, they came for AFSCME and I didn't do anything, so then I said they came for SEIU. No. In Wisconsin, when they came for our public sector unions and they came to take away all the collective bargaining rights, students at the University of Wisconsin, teaching assistants, marched on the Capitol. They got to that Capitol. They did a union rally, and you all know how a union rally goes, right? You all understand. You get there, hold your signs up for a little bit, talk to each other about how much you wish it was the 1930s, and then you go out and get a cup of coffee, right? This time they didn't do it. The head of the Teaching Assistants Union tried the door and said, the door to the Capitol is unlocked. Why don't we go in and occupy the Capitol and tell the governor what we think of his plan? And the next day, 8,000 people showed up. I went and spoke at that rally. There was a guy standing next to me before I went up on the stage. He had a sign in Arabic. I've covered wars in the Middle East. I said, Assalamu alaikum. He said, I don't speak Arabic. I said, brother, you can understand my confusion, the sign. And he said, oh yeah, I went on the internet. It says, if Egypt can beat Hosni Mubarak, Wisconsin can beat Scott Walker. It was cold in Wisconsin. It was very, very cold. People walked around with their signs. There's one guy walking in front of me one day, had a sign that said, I thought Cairo would be warmer. But they came. They came. And it was union members first, but then it was small business owners. Do you know that at a certain point, the Capitol was occupied. There was roughly 8,000 people, 5,000 to 8,000 people sleeping in the Capitol every night. Every step covered, the entire Capitol. You've seen those pictures. But you know how they survived? They had every pizza place in town was running pizzas up to the Capitol and giving them away for free. Coffee shops were coming, bringing their coffee up and giving it away for free. Why? Because they're in a capital city. They want public employees to be paid well so that they can come out and buy pizzas and coffee the next day. It makes sense, right? It's the demand side, not the supply side. So this is an incredible thing. So 8,000 people show up. I'm at this rally, this wonderful situation. And then I thought, it can't get better than this. I haven't seen 8,000 people come up for public employees. And the next day, 20,000 came. The next day, 40,000. By Friday, the Reverend Jesse Jackson was standing on the steps of our Capitol looking out over the crowd, and he said, this isn't a labor moment anymore. This is a King moment. This is a Gandhi moment. This is a social justice moment. Tens of thousands of people are rising up to push back. And it wasn't just tens of thousands. Our last rally, done after we lost, right? And this concept is, the New York Times said we lost. Because the governor broke the bill apart and he signed it. And so I went down, and it's an interesting thing. Told we had been defeated. I thought, okay, well, it's a bummer. It had been great to have all these people out in this movement. But some of my farmer friends were coming in, and farm doesn't get the New York Times till a couple days later, so they hadn't been informed that we had been defeated. So my farmer friends are down there. I took my daughter along, and we got on the tractors. We started rolling toward the Capitol. It's about 4 miles in. I don't know, you guys are sophisticated Californians, so you're not aware. Tractors move rather slowly. It took us about a half hour to get to the first corner where there were kids who had a little sign that said, thank you, farmers. I thought, this is a bummer, because somebody forgot to tell the kids, too, that we had been defeated. And as we're rolling along, suddenly police cars show up. And I'm like, oh, damn, I'm in so much trouble with my wife because I'm going to get arrested at a farmer rally. And no, I forgot. We were in Madison, Wisconsin. The police were supporters of the struggle because police officers and sheriff's deputies are blue-collar trade unionists, and they weren't coming to arrest us. They were coming to block traffic so we could head toward the Capitol. Then the SUVs came up. The SUVs came up, and they were. I thought, oh, we're doomed now because SUVs don't like tractors. SUV move fast, tractor move slow, And so I suddenly saw the window going down, and I saw an arm coming out of the window. And I said to my daughter, shield your eyes from the one-fingered signal of disapproval for the trade union movement. But no, it wasn't that. It was a clenched fist of solidarity, and the people in the SUVs were coming to slow down and help us to get up through that traffic. And we're not smart in Wisconsin. But after 3 weeks of struggle, we had learned how to honk, this is what democracy looks like on our phones and on our horns for our cars. And so they were going along going beep, 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 beep. And we're rolling along, and the snow is coming down, and the tractors are there, and the cops are there, and the SUVs are there. And I said, this is the most beautiful moment of my life and the most depressing day of my life because we've been defeated. We have lost. There's no hope. New York Times says we've been defeated. And we popped the curb into that great square around the Capitol in Madison on March 12th of last year. And the snow coming down, the horns, the clenched fists in the air, defeat, sadness, sorrow. And I looked up, and there was 180,000 people that do not read the New York Times. And that did not accept when somebody told us we were beaten. And you know what happened in Wisconsin? You don't see this in so much of our media, but in a series of recall elections, we did not take our governor out. I wish we had. I wish we were as capable as Californians of recalling, but it doesn't always turn out well. But we recalled the leadership of our state Senate, and we are the only state in the country that has taken away Republican control of our legislature and given it to the Democrats. We've prevented our governor from legislating. And we were out there with those signs and said, this law is unconstitutional. What they're doing is wrong. And they laughed at us. The media laughed at us. The politicians laughed at us. But last week, a judge in Wisconsin ruled that Scott Walker's law is unconstitutional. We held the line, and our unions are in negotiations now on contracts to protect their workers, not because of politicians, not because of all the stuff we see reported in the news, but because working class people showed solidarity against a fight against their rights and against the public sector. That's why we're winning in Wisconsin, and that's why I've come to California. Because our fight, we're going to win Wisconsin. We're going to take care of it. It's going to be hard. It's one of the most brutal battles you've ever seen. We won Ohio already. They put labor rights on the ballot. Said, you want public sector workers to have a right to organize, right to collective bargaining? And of course, everybody hates public sector. There's nothing you hate more than a teacher, right? Except maybe a cop, okay? And so everybody hates the public sector. No, let's just be clear. I don't think any of us wants a firefighter to be well compensated. So we know full well that, of course, an effort to protect the collective bargaining rights of public sector workers would be in bad shape. No, we put it on the ballot in Ohio. 61% of Ohioans voted for labor rights. 82 of 88 counties. John Boehner's home district voted to protect the rights of workers to organize. So, brothers and sisters, we're winning all over. But now I got a little problem. Because California is such a big deal, right? Oh, yeah, everybody lives in California, and you got Hollywood and San Francisco. And what you guys do, California gets a cold, the rest of the country has the flu, right? So what you do matters. And your billionaires have decided to put Proposition 32 on the ballot. Nice hiss. You're getting up there. Good. I like that. you understand that Proposition 32 is exactly the same as what Walker did? Proposition 32 is exactly the same as what John Kasich did. It is exactly the same strategy. The strategy is not to worry about wages, benefits, and pensions. That you get once you get rid of the political power. Proposition 32 is a struggle on the part of the wealthiest people in California and America. Because remember, the Koch brothers, they've come here as well. Wealthiest people in America have come here for the purpose of making sure that your unions are not functional, that they cannot have a voice in our political life. And do you understand what happens if Proposition 32 passes? If it passes here, you will see a rapid transition of California politics. The wealthy will be able to buy elections because, yes, it is true that Meg Whitman might outspend you 19-1 and you still beat her, but when you take away the one, she wins. When you shut down the unions as a political voice, they win. And it doesn't even matter whether they win as Republicans or Democrats, because if the money is there and the unions are not a voice in our politics, then even Democrats will begin to reflect what the money says. And so in very rapid order, California changes, but so does America. This model legislation from California will become the model across the country. And so you're not in a fight for yourselves on Proposition 32. I wish you were, and I want you to protect yourselves. You are in a fight for the future of the republic. This country cannot survive without strong and functional unions. And your fight on Proposition 32 is exactly the same as the fight in Wisconsin, the fight in Ohio. Don't lose sight of this. Don't lose sight of this. You must win. You must win. Not for yourselves, but if you fail on Proposition 32, we will see a massive assault on the public sector. And that massive assault, there's a wonderful poster in Wisconsin. It summed up everything we fought about there. It had a little girl, and she was holding up her lunch tray from school. And she was looking up and she said, "Mama, the governor says the rich man needs my lunch money." That's what we're fighting about. We are fighting about a redistribution of the wealth upward, where they would take a child's lunch money, where they would take food stamp money and move it up the ladder to the wealthiest people in America, and where they would privatize our basic services so that they can make a few more dollars. That's what Proposition 32 is about. It is not about campaign contributions. It is not about politics. It is not about unions. It is not about billionaires. It is about a basic, fundamental question of a humane society. Will you have some group of people who can pool their resources and come into the political fight and say, no. We aren't going to give away everything that we've fought for and built. We are going to make a civil society. We're going to make sure that that child has her lunch money. We're going to make sure that the police officer and the firefighter has the resources to do their job. We're going to make sure that architects and engineers and public employees across all of the different sectors are well compensated, that they have decent pay, decent benefits, decent pensions, because that is part of the infrastructure of a civil society. And so, brothers and sisters, I will tell you this, it's a simple message. Simple message. Mitt Romney is going to get beaten on November 6th. He is going to lose, partially because he's just fundamentally incompetent as a human being. But if Mitt Romney loses and Proposition 32 wins, we've suffered a worse setback than the reverse. Because if Proposition 32 wins in California, you will send a wave across this country that will swamp the public sector and that will ultimately deconstruct everything that is good and functional about America. And so I don't want to put any pressure on you. But I come from Wisconsin, where we have fought great battles and put hundreds of thousands of people in the street, and where we have held the line for 18 months against the austerity agenda and the cuts, and we are winning in Wisconsin, but we need you to win in California. You must defeat Proposition 32. It is the ultimate act of solidarity, not just for yourselves, but for workers and for citizens across this republic. Solidarity, brothers and sisters. I stand with you, and I want you to win.
Thank you, John, for that great talk. I think maybe a few people have questions, so John has agreed to take a few minutes and take questions. So anybody, if you have a question, just raise your hand or come to the. We don't have microphone. Yeah, we have microphone.
You can yell it out.
Okay.
What do you say? What do you got, sister?
Okay.
Oh, I know. I know. It's hard. Believe me. Do you want to know the funny thing about it? When Scott Walker was running for governor of Wisconsin in 2010, in the exit polls, 37% of union households voted for him. That would be the equivalent of 37% of beef cattle voting for McDonald's. And, you know, it's a bad move, but we got a big problem. And, you know, I think that the great challenge that we have, it's not your hard work. You can work the hell out of that and your neighbors, and you gotta. Sister, you don't get it. There are no excuses for you. Even if it's hard, even if you're not winning, you gotta go do it, because it's part of a basic infrastructure of everything that happens. But I want to tell you something. We gotta get our message better. Let me say that very, very bluntly. Our labor movement has tended to be too cautious in its messaging. And I will tell you what happens when you get your message together. It's pretty simple, okay? Who cares about NFL refs? I don't care about NFL refs. I never, ever think about them unless they do something wrong. Have you ever thought about a National Football League ref on any day unless they screw something up? You don't. NFL refs got themselves into a little bit of a battle with it. They got locked out. And no one cared. No one cared until they screwed up the Packers-Seahawks game. And when they screwed that game up, suddenly right-wing conservatives are saying, bring the union refs back. Well, do you understand? Messaging is about getting people to understand, and this includes your own members as well as everybody else, what's fundamentally at stake. We don't talk about it the way we should too often. I never, ever talk about teacher pay, teacher benefits, teacher wages, something like that. I don't talk about that. I wouldn't do it talking about you guys either. Here, when we're in the room, we could talk about your benefit package and what we're fighting for. But when you're out in the fight, even with your own friends and neighbors, what you have to talk about is what's at stake. And I cannot emphasize to you, what is at stake is not the ability of unions to have a voice in our politics. Who cares if unions have a voice in our politics? Nobody does. You're not going to get ordinary people to care about that. What is at stake is that unions are the only folks that will go out and stand up to make sure that kids have the lunch money that they need, to make sure that our basic services are delivered, to make sure that we are safe in our communities. So your messaging has to be that broader message. And they've got to give you that for when you go and talk to people. So I know it's hard. And you're going to run into people that don't do the job. But you don't have a choice. You got to go do it. But your leadership, the unions, have to get their act together. And the good news is, the fights of these last few years, I'm starting to see unions do a tremendously better job. And I love what I'm seeing. I love what I'm seeing messaging-wise on Prop 32. It looks good. And if you look at the polling, it's starting to move the right direction. Problem? They got all the money in the world. And you know what the biggest problem for you here in California is? This is the biggest problem for you in California. Mitt Romney is such a lousy candidate that the wealthy folks that have thought they were going to spend all their money electing Mitt Romney are going to realize sometime in October that it's a waste of money. And then they're going to look around and say, where should we spend our money? And they may double and triple up on what they send into California. I understand that. So our fight is not, even though things look to be going well on 32, I want you out there on November 6th at 5:30 in the afternoon, knocking on that door and dragging that last person out. Because we got to win this one. And I think they're going to give you the messaging for it, but it's still going to be a hell of a battle. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for going and talking to those other folks. Thank you. Got another question here? I'm not going to make you ask questions, brothers and sisters, but I will take them. Okay, brother.
So one of the things that you talked about was how the New York Times declared defeat, and yet the people knew they weren't defeated. And
Yeah.
Actually, in the Chicago teacher strike,
Oh, yeah.
the New York Times was lambasting the greedy teachers again. And so how do you get your own media going so that the working class is not dependent on elite media to tell them when they're winning and losing?
That's a terrific question, and it's an area I've worked in a lot. Let me tell you, I'm not going to go into a long explanation for it. We wrote a book on it called The Death and Life of American Journalism. Go buy it. It makes a fine holiday gift. But let me tell you the simplest thing. We already have it. It's there. What we need to do is support it. When we got in the fight in Wisconsin, in fact, I wrote a chapter in my book about Wisconsin. When we got in the fight in Wisconsin, Amy Goodman showed up that first week. She broadcast live on Democracy Now! From inside the Capitol with people who were occupying it. And that Amy Goodman's now on hundreds of stations across this country. We don't respect her enough because she's actually out doing it. But you know what else? Ed Schultz from MSNBC came out, set up a stage across from the Capitol, and broadcast live for 3 days. And let me tell you something. That was transformational. So we have the beginnings of an infrastructure there, and we've got other things. But I want to tell you this. I'm done with union publications that just talk to union members. I want union publications that inform union members. They got to have the information they need, but I want them to start to talk to the whole community because our newspapers and our radio stations and our commercial television stations don't do the job of informing the people. And so, yes, we've got to start to create our own media, but we don't have to recreate everything they've done because, brothers and sisters, the future's right in here. We can do things digitally that we couldn't even imagine. You don't have to do everything they do, but you do have to do something, and we all have to become media savvy. Let me take a quick one from this lovely lady.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I really like the imagery of the little girl and her lunch tray and everything, and if there's some kind of an even shorter, like, catchphrase or something that we can let people know what they're going to lose.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily have directly to do with the unions, but like public works, different things. Do you have any suggestions on how to boil it down?
I have a quick one. And I actually, bizarrely enough, I love being with you. I would stay here all day. At some point, I got to go grab a plane. I'm not actually physically going to grab it, but there's a wonderful thing that happened. I think we should be, and I don't know how to say this in the right way, but I think we should be a lot meaner. In Wisconsin, we were doing all these protests, and they were great, and it felt really, really good. But you could tell nothing really was coming out of it, right? It wasn't quite gelling. And then California Nurses Association came in with a bunch of organizers, and they came in with a very simple message. Don't blame the workers, blame Wall Street. I think this is a really big deal. We need to deflect blame from us onto the people that actually have the money. And we spend too much time defending us and saying, well, we're not that bad. We'll give you a furlough day. We'll give you concessions. We're cooperative, right? They don't care. That means nothing to them because they're told so often that it's the workers that are the fault. You have a pension. You have benefits. Somehow you're the problem. And so my simple catchphrase is deflect the blame. Let's put the blame where it belongs. And let's just say, there's not a single worker in this country, not the laziest, most shiftless, most useless person you have ever worked with, who has begun to do the harm to this republic that Wall Street and the banksters do every single day. So let's blame Wall Street and stop blaming the workers. Solidarity, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for having me with you. I'm deeply honored to be with you.